Let's take a look at lesson activity number 5 in lesson number 6. A hotel room has 200 rooms. Those with kitchen facilities rent for $100 per night, and those without kitchen facilities rent for $80 per night. On a night when the hotel was completely occupied, revenues were $17,000. How many of each type of room does the hotel have? Okay, again, as with some of the previous story opportunities, we have two different things we're considering. In this case, it's a room with kitchen facilities and a room without kitchen facilities. We know a total number, 200. We know two rates, dollars per night, dollars per night. And we know total revenues of 17,000. So as I've mentioned before, the story is different, the context is different, yet the approach is pretty similar for all of these problems. So again, you want to look at the question that you're being asked to find, and that gives you a sense of where you can begin to identify your unknown quantities. So how many of each type of room does the hotel have? Okay, so I will let X equal, sure we get the fine point here, we'll let X equal the number of hotel rooms with kitchen facilities, with kitchens, and Y equal the number of hotel rooms without kitchen facilities. Okay. Now, while we're doing this method of writing out a description of each one of our unknown variables, I want to show you a similar approach that some of you may have learned in a previous class, and that is using a table to help you do a very similar thing to what we just did. So your table will have two different types of things. Those things are rooms, room with kitchen. I don't even have to put the room in there. And without kitchen. And you'll see why in a minute. Okay. And down here is often a total of the things above. Sometimes this, instead of being a total, it can be a relationship between these two things, like one is 35 more than the other, or there's 35 more rooms with kitchens and without. But in our case, we were given a total of our rooms as 200. So that's one way you can start to take some of this information given in the story and find a place for it in this table. So I'm going to put the 200 right here. I know that's a total. Now this is where your description of what each unknown is comes in. It comes in the heading right here, in the heading of your column. So I'm going to call the heading of that column number of rooms. So when I'm looking at this cell right here, I'm looking at the number of rooms with kitchens. And so if you don't like writing these sentences out this way, notice you're saying exactly the same thing here. You have a quantity word number. You have a unit called rooms with kitchens. So we're going to assign to that X. Now this next cell is the number of rooms without kitchens, and we can decide to call that Y. And notice if you add these two numbers, you get your total number of rooms, 200. So in fact, that's how we can write our very first equation, because we know the total number of rooms. Okay. Next, you want to deal with this idea of revenue. Okay. And the revenue is gotten by taking the number of rooms times the cost per room, depending on what type of room you have. So the next thing we want to do is we want to put in our rate. This middle column here is for our rate. And in this case, the rate will be dollars per room. Okay. Sometimes it could be miles per hour, or dollars per fund, or it might be an interest rate. Okay, so this is my dollars per room, my rate. So for the room with a kitchen, it's more expensive. It's $100 for each room. And then the rate for my room without a kitchen is $80. Now, this final cell here doesn't get filled in because we don't have some kind of combination rate or anything, or a room that has both a kitchen and not a kitchen, right? Those are mutually exclusive. So that's what we do with the middle column. So now let's think about the final idea here. How do we figure out how much revenue we get from the rooms with kitchens? Well, that's going to be the number of rooms that have kitchens times its rate, which is $100 per room. So this would be the amount of revenue earned on X rooms. You tell me the number for X. I fill in X with that number. For example, I have 50 rooms or 60 rooms or 70 rooms, and I multiply that number by 100. That's going to give me the revenue for that many rooms. Similarly, 80 times Y, or 80Y, will be the amount of revenue in dollars earned on Y rooms. Now, if I need to, I can go back here and see, oh yeah, Y is the number of rooms without kitchen facilities, or X is the number of rooms with kitchen facilities. So in this final column, we're going to say revenue in dollars. So now if I use the same idea that I did earlier, and I'm trying to figure out what does this cell represent, I look at my heading, revenue from rooms with kitchens, and that's simply this multiplication right here horizontally, 100x. And if I look at this cell right here, that's the revenue from rooms without kitchens. And again, if I multiply straight across, that's 80 times Y. And I know that if I try to collect all the revenue from all 200 rooms, I would get $17,000. And that becomes my next equation, my next what equals what. Right? That makes sense, I hope. So this what equals what says if I take all the revenue from all my rooms with kitchens and I add it to all the revenue I collect from my rooms without kitchens for one night, I'm going to make $17,000. This one just says, hey, the number of rooms with kitchens and the number of rooms without kitchens totals 200. So this is our system. And now we have to solve for both X and Y. Okay, where we've defined X to be the number of rooms with kitchen facilities and Y the number of rooms without. So as with some similar problems, I'm going to rewrite this equation either in terms of X or in terms of Y. My habit is I tend to solve that first equation for Y, and I get 200 minus X. And I always put that in parentheses. And if you recall in our last lesson, when you didn't get to use a Y, you would have had to say the number of rooms without kitchen facilities was the total, 200, take away X, the number of rooms with kitchen facilities. So now I'm going to take this value for Y and I'm going to put it right into this equation and rewrite that equation. 100x plus 80 times 200 minus x equals 17,000. And now I have one equation with one unknown, and I get to solve it. So let's do that. 100x plus 16,000 minus 80x equals 17,000. Now I combine like terms. 100x take away 80x is 20x plus 16,000 equals 17,000. I subtract 16,000 from each side, and I get 20x equals 1,000, and now I divide both sides by 20, and I get 50. So if I come back up here and I look at one of my original equations, and I substitute 50 in for x, I see that 50 plus y is 200, so y is 200 minus 50, so y is the number 150. And now I take this information, these values for my variables, and I put it back into the context of the story by writing a sentence. So the hotel rented 50 rooms with kitchen facilities and 150 rooms without kitchen facilities. Okay. So that concludes the lesson activities for lesson number 6. I hope that you have now had enough practice with defining variable expressions, which are in this case x, y, 100x, and 80y. And again, I want to point out that to make sure that your sentence is correct, you would make sure in each one of your sentences, in each one of your definitions, you can find a word that signifies a quantity, number, and amount, and that you also can underline a unit. So here it would be rooms with kitchens, rooms without kitchens. The units here would be dollars because we're talking about revenue. Okay. Let me know if you have any questions.